Everyone. This is Steve Gay from Interwest Consulting Group, and welcome to our webinar today. If anyone can't hear us, please feel free to click the raise your hand in the webinar, and we'll make sure to adjust the sound. So again, thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate your time. First, I want to apologize for rescheduling from our last planned session. We realized we had a conflict with some other MISAC events, so we wanted to reschedule that to today. Momentarily, I'm going to hand it over to Mohammed and Mary Ellen, and they're going to give you an overview of some of our client work that we're doing with SharePoint and GIS. But first, I wanted to give you kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about, and let you know a little bit about who Interwest is. I also wanted to let you know this is the second webinar that we have provided in a series about SharePoint and GIS. This time we're going to be focusing on asset management. Our first webinar was talking about the City of Elk Grove and how they're using SharePoint and GIS for some things like tracking of capital improvement projects, displaying interactive web maps on the city's website, and we also spent some time talking about how Interwest is helping the City of Elk Grove implement the GIS components for the city's migration from SunGard's Naviline to SunGard's One solution. And if you would like to see the recording for that webinar, you can actually find that on our blog, which is listed here on the first slide. So you're welcome to go back and watch that. And if you have any questions about that, also don't hesitate to let us know. So a little bit about Interwest Consulting Group. We are a contracting agency or contracting company that provides staffing support to cities and counties, and we provide services within a variety of business lines: building and safety, engineering, real estate, for example, as well as IT and GIS, which is why we're here today. We provide different types of services, from contracting services to as-needed support for projects, as well as hosted IT services. Some of the clients that we serve, and a few that we're going to talk about today, are, for example, the CSD, or the Consumer Service District, which is the Park and Fire District within the Northern California, Sacramento area. We're going to talk about how we've helped them develop solutions for sidewalk inspections and storm drain compliance. We're also going to talk about the City of Covina and how we help them develop a mobile GIS solution to capture data during field inspections. And we're going to focus quite a bit on the City of Bell as well. We're going to talk about how we have helped them develop SharePoint solutions focusing on their facility and work order management, as well as asset management in GIS. So we'll go into more detail in that momentarily. Just a quick overview of the City of Bell's architecture. They have a blended environment of both on-premise and hosted services. So, for example, on-premise, they have their email and their police dispatch. But they have taken advantage of a variety of hosted services as well. So some of those are from Interwest, as well as some other agencies or services. So, for example, they use Comcate to manage their code enforcement tracking. They use Esri's ArcGIS Online to deploy their city's map viewers. And then Interwest provides a variety of hosted services to support the city. For GIS, we provide map services that integrate into both the Comcate hosted application as well as their Esri map viewers for staff to use. And then additionally, the SharePoint applications that we're going to talk about shortly here, those are also hosted by Interwest. So the city is able to access those very quickly and easily from our hosted server. So one thing I wanted to mention is that today we're going to conduct a couple of polls, and this is a good time for us to go ahead and start the first one. What we wanted to do was ask about how you, if you are in fact using SharePoint, what methods you're using to deploy SharePoint. So for example, you can see some of the options on the screen there. On-premise SharePoint solution, hosted via Microsoft SharePoint Online, or if you're not using SharePoint, go ahead and click that third option there. So I'm going to take a second. All right, great. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And I'm going to share the results there. So great, so you have a nice mixture there. Looks like more people are hosting SharePoint on-premise there. So that's great. That's an excellent example of how SharePoint can be used. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Mohammed, and he's going to go into more specific detail about the services that we've been providing to the City of Bell, specifically on their SharePoint.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohammed. And kind of just a background on the architecture for SharePoint. City of Bell is using a SharePoint 2010 foundation hosted environment through Interwest. And we're providing them with just a foundation level of SharePoint. They're not running an enterprise yet, but they are going to be moving over to the SharePoint 2013 architecture in the near future. So one of the problem areas that we discovered with Bell last year was that in talking to their housing manager, they didn't have a central point to track all the requests that came in from their tenants. So the City of Bell owns mobile parks throughout the city, about three of them, and they have about, I would say, about 30 to 40 tenants that are actually occupying those mobile home parks. And so they only had one housing manager that was in charge of all the 3 parks, and she was tracking all the requests and the tenant names all in this one laptop that was never getting backed up, or was never essentially on the network. So they came to us and asked us, how can we solve this problem? And one of the things that we looked at was, how can we make this a streamlined approach? How can we make sure that A, everything is getting backed up, and B, at least provide some support for the housing manager to keep all these requests at a central location where either the managers or herself can log in and look at any of the open and active requests that are in the system. So one thing we did was we said, let's do the SharePoint approach. It's very effective and it's inexpensive to implement something like that. So we went ahead and developed a hosted platform for City of Bell to log into, and they're able to log into from any location that they can have access to the internet. This definitely gave them a single point of contact. This actually gave them a central point of entry, allowing them to log in from anywhere and actually make changes on this platform. What this allowed also was the management side. They had a management dashboard which allowed the managers to see what open requests are in the system and able to accommodate those requests. City of Bell also has vendors that they go to for some of these requests that come in from the tenant side. So they have like a plumbing vendor, or they have a handyman service that comes out and does a lot of the handyman things in the mobile park. So what this also allowed them to do was allowed them to have a workflow set up so that any request that came in, they were allowed to then route it to these services. And then they would get an email from the City of Bell system allowing them to see what the request comes in and make any edits and changes. So let's go into the actual screenshot of what the system looks like. Again, it's a very simple form system that you see on your screen right now is, again, it's pulling the tenant name from another site within SharePoint, and this allows us to keep it completely separate from the form, which makes us go ahead and update just the tenant names and all this information, which this form actually pulls from. So this form is used from the housing manager side whenever they receive a request. It's very simple. Anybody does it. So also part of this process was they were able to assign this or have the ability for Parks and Rec to input information in. So again, now the housing manager is not involved in just getting the simple issues that come across. Anybody in the city can actually go into the system and input this information in. And then again, once they input this information in, they select the vendor that it needs to go to. An email gets automatically sent out to the housing manager as well as the vendor letting know there's a request in the system, and then they're able to go back and look at it. So here's another slide kind of going over how the systems database works. These are two different sites within SharePoint that it's pulling information from. One's a vendor list, so you can see all the vendor names, the phone numbers, what the contact information is. The second list that you see on the bottom of your screen is the tenant name list. Again, this is the tenant name information that's actually pulling what street address, the rental information, their phone numbers, their emergency contact. All of this is built into a SharePoint site. Again, streamlining the approach so that anybody can, essentially look at this information and contact the tenant if the housing manager is not available. This is an overview slide of what is the active issues in the system. As you can see, this is essentially a management dashboard. So a manager, parks manager can go log in, and they're able to see what the active issues are currently there are at these mobile home parks. Very simple, tenant name information, description, what the priority level is, and if it's active or not active. This also allows them to run reports on a quarterly timeline or yearly to see how many incidents were open and closed, and how long did it take to actually respond to a incident. So, when they do their council reports every, couple months, they're able to track all of this information, and for staffing purposes, you can see that, hey, we're annotated with a lot of requests, so we need another staff member or whatnot. So moving on, another issue that City of Bell had when we were talking about this was their facility management. Just like housing, they didn't have a way to keep track of all the facility maintenance requests that came in, whether they were from the parks, concession stands, restrooms, any of the facilities that the City of Bell owned. They weren't able to keep track of all the requests that were coming in, whether it was from the citizen side or from the staff. Excuse me. So, what we did was then we figured out what the workflow was, how they wanted to manage. They had different vendors for a lot of these facilities maintenance requests that come in. Actually, they only had one vendor, sorry about that they had a contract with that would go out and actually fix the facility. So whether if it's a bathroom door being broken to a concession stand that needed to be filled with snacks, they had a vendor that went out and actually did all of these requests for them. So we created another simple site for them through SharePoint, allowing them to have a central point of entry, also having the ability to create automated alerts for them, and then also having the ability to have a management dashboard. This was big for them to have a management dashboard because, again, they didn't know what was getting done, what wasn't getting done, and the ability to track all of these requests. The Parks Department is fairly large for City of Bell. They also incorporate a lot of sports at the Parks Department. So they have fields that they have that the city owns that has the ability to they rent out to people. So whether it's grass that needs to be cut or there's certain things that are going on on the field side that need to be done, there was no way to track it. So having a central system allowed them to make sure that the facilities were managed properly. So with that being said, this system allowed their vendors as well to log in remotely and actually manage the system for them. So, whenever a request came in, here's a form that they actually fill out. So whenever a request came in through this form that they fill out, the vendor actually gets an email as well. So they are able to see, hey, there is a facility request that's coming in. This is what the information is that needs to be taken care of, and this needs to be done, what the priority level is to get it done. And then they're able to go in there and actually edit this request and have the ability to close it out when it's completed. And the great thing about this was the City of Bell has a lot of facilities, so they were able to track it down and see what facilities always needs attention. So they were able to filter this out every 6 months and say, hey, this park is always, this bench is always getting broken at this park. What's going on? So this helped them actually replace equipment if they needed to be, and it also helped track all the problem areas they were having. So instead of just keep repairing it, they would just go and actually swap the bench out with a brand new bench, and that helped alleviate a lot of their issues. Previous to this, there was only emails and voicemails that they received of requests, so there was no real way of tracking it. So there were just post-it notes or Microsoft Excel sheets that would just show up with the different requests that they needed to be filled and fixed. So again, management dashboard allowed them to keep track of all the requests that were coming in the system and have the ability to get it properly taken care of in a timely manner. So here is the management dashboard that the managers see on a daily basis. Again, this is all dynamic. Everybody uses SharePoint, so they know that once it goes into a system, it's all dynamically updated on a, every couple minutes it gets refreshed automatically. So moving on, another problem area that the City of Bell had was Public Works asset management. And Public Works asset management was unique, actually, just because they wanted to track the different street lights or tree maintenance or road repair that happen throughout the city. So they only have one Public Works facility manager that does that. Doesn't have any other staff members that help him with this request. So when I was talking to him, last year, he would tell me that he would just show me all the different thousands of emails that he would get within the year of all the different requests. And then he would just prioritize those by the emails that he would read, and then he would just prioritize it to see which one needed to get done right away. So there was no real way of actually figuring out for him what, how to actually take care of the lower priority items versus higher priority items. So when talking to him, we created a simple form for him, for his staff to fill out at the city, so they're able to keep requests. And usually the way it worked previous to SharePoint was he would get a call into the city, the receptionist would transfer it to his voicemail, and then he would just have voicemails over voicemails of requests that needed to be taken care of, whether it came from council or staff or even citizens, because citizens usually called and said, hey, my street light outside from my house is out, or there's a tree that's hanging down that needs to be cut, or whatever the case was, or a pothole. So in creating this SharePoint system for him, he was able to streamline the approach of how to handle these requests that came in. The biggest I think help that he had was, instead of the receptionist forwarding the call to his voicemail, the receptionist had access to the system and actually took the information down from the citizen and input it into the form. And so there was the elimination of voicemails, essentially. So the receptionist pretty much filled out the request for the behalf of him and able to put down the citizen's name, the address, their email address, their phone number, whether they're Spanish speaking or not, so that when he does receive the request, he knows that he needs to get a translator on the phone with him to translate any of the questions the citizen might have. So again, they have one vendor which the email went to, and then he also received it, letting him know that it needed to be taken care of. Again, this was a big help for him. Whenever I see him, he always tells me how great this system is, just because the sheer fact that it takes away from a lot of his day-to-day time. He's able to track it easier. Again, this is also mobile ready, so he's able to see it on his phone as well as on his iPad. Here's an overview of the actual dashboard that he sees when he logs in. Again, he's able to run requests, able to run reports, as to see what was completed, what was not completed, how long it took to complete certain items. So again, I just wanted to kind of recap our conversation today regarding the asset management piece in SharePoint. It's very quick to implement, very cost effective. Like I said, Foundation from Microsoft SharePoint Foundation is a free tool offered by Microsoft. So very cost effective for the city, and automated workflows. That was a key part of them to make sure that the vendors were able to receive emails, and then also the housing managers or the public works managers were able to see the different alerts that came through the system. Again, making sure that it was more of a proactive versus a reactive approach. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Mary Ellen. She's going to talk about GIS and SharePoint.
So the City of Bell's GIS environment is cloud-based. They have an ArcGIS Online organization account, and then they have hosted map services that we host at Interwest on our ArcGIS server, and they consume in their ArcGIS Online account. They don't have any desktop or on-premise software. So this is just a shot of their customized screen that they see for their ArcGIS Online account, and then they have two viewers for community development and community services. The community development viewer displays their sewer, storm, street improvement projects, general plan, and zoning. And they can click on any of these assets, the street lights, for example, and a pop-up window will come up and they can view attributes of that street light in this viewer. And they can also edit the data from this as well. Community services viewer is focused on city-owned properties and their transit, their bus stops, bus line. You can see the flow of their bus line from one stop to the next, and their shuttle stops. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Collector for ArcGIS. Collector is an application that you can use on tablets or mobile devices or phones in the field to collect GIS data. So we're going to launch a poll to find out how many of you are using Collector for ArcGIS now, or what other methods you're using to do field collection of GIS data. Such as GPS units or other methods. Okay. I'll go ahead and close the poll. And it looks like nobody is using anything right now, so that's good. We're going to talk about some options for you guys to use in the future for collection. So mobile GIS has changed in the last few years about expectations of. So in the beginning, using GPS units was more of a lengthy process. You had to do a daily check-in, do more training to send staff in the field to use GPS units. There were multiple files that had to be synced up. So if you had 3 people in the field on 3 separate units, when they come back into the office, you have to sync those 3 files back to the data that is stored on your server. The distribution time and the training was more time-consuming. But they are more precise. GPS units are more precise, so sometimes there's more precision than is needed. So now a feature class can be created in the same day. We can get a request in the morning and have that feature class available later that day for field collections. But either the same day or the next day, field crews can go out using their devices, so they could use their own personal phones or tablets or iPhones, Androids, or tablet devices that their city issues. And multiple users can access the same data. So it's live data entry. If there's 3 or 5, however many people in the field collecting data, they're all editing the same feature class. There's no syncing at the end. you can also do disconnected, in which case you'd need to sync when you come back to the office. But when you can have a live connection from your device and live data entry, which is immediately visible to field staff that are in the field with you, as well as people back at the office. And it's an intuitive interface, and that makes there greater acceptance among the users and less training time for field staff. So at the City of Bell, one of the needs we had was to collect curb ramps. The city needed to create an improvement plan to collect each curb ramp in its condition to comply with ADA compliance efforts, and they needed to also spread that financial burden over multiple years. So they could decide to upgrade the curbs that are closest to each other to save money, or that were in the most need, or that were near known citizens that had a need to use the curb ramps for disabilities. So the solution was to create a ArcGIS Online map and use that map for field collection purposes. Staff access the map on iPads to collect the ramps in need of repair and rate the ramps by severity of need. And here's a view of that map in ArcGIS Online that you would view from a desktop as well as on an iPad, where they could click on add the point or click on an existing point for an existing ramp and edit the information about that. And then after that process was complete, after the field collection was complete, a transition plan was created to determine how to spread that financial burden across multiple years, and this could be presented to management or city council. So the Esri environment at the next two clients I'm going to talk about is the City of Covina and Cosumnes Community Services District, which is a park and fire district. The City of Covina has an on-premise ArcGIS desktop environment as well as an ArcGIS server, and they also have their own ArcGIS Online organization account. However, for this project that we did for them, we did everything on our server to be able to be up and running faster, and then migrated all the data to their server when it was complete. And for the Cosumnes Community Services District, they're a little unique in that they have no desktop software at all. Everything is hosted in ArcGIS Online. All their services are hosted in ArcGIS Online, and everyone edits and accesses data from either ArcGIS Online or Collector or Explorer, one of the other Esri mobile apps. At the City of Covina, they needed to do rental inspections. They have 1,300 rental properties, and they needed to do an initial review to determine which properties had violations of community or city standards. So Interwest had our field collection staff use the map that we created and accessed it into the collector and went into the field and took photographs and reviewed each of those rental properties, recorded their findings in collector in the field on tablets, and then it was a live data stream back to the office was immediately available in their ArcGIS Online web maps for staff in the office. Additional web maps were created to visually represent the field collection for city staff to analyze the outcomes. And this is the map that someone in the office would see in ArcGIS Online that shows the pass or fail status of various rental properties. You can see the pictures. They're able to take multiple pictures on the tablets, or you could use phones as well in the field and attach those to each rental property. And then you can do analysis in ArcGIS Online to see which community. There might be a specific community, like this community here's a lot of green. There's not a lot of trouble right there, but then there's other communities where many houses in a small space need attention. The city received the Helen Putnam Award for Excellence in Internal Administration for the innovative solution of their rental inspection program. The Cosumnes Community Services District utilized ArcGIS Online for all of their GIS needs, but the two projects I'm going to talk about today are sidewalks and drainage inlets. For sidewalks, they needed to collect in the field where there were sidewalk defects so they could have contractors come and repair that. And for the drainage inlets, they needed an inventory of their drainage inlets, the pipelines and outfalls, to meet California State Water Control Board storm sewer system requirements. So for both, the solution was web maps that Interwest created for CSD's field staff, and then their field staff went into the field with collector for ArcGIS on tablets. And for the sidewalk, they added the points, took photographs of the defect, and then edited information about the size of the defect or what's the probable cause, inspection date, things like that. For the drainage inlets, we partnered with the City of Elk Grove because we have 95 parks at the Community Services District, and many of those are in the City of Elk Grove. So we partnered with the City of Elk Grove to get an initial data set with their inlets, pipelines, and outfalls, and then we added any inlets that were pipes or outfalls that were within the district's parks and fire properties. And for this implementation, they also have a web page to view and edit the sidewalk repair updates directly from the REST endpoint. So here's an example of the map that is seen in ArcGIS Online. With the field staff went along, they also have a landscape corridors in addition to the parks. They went along and added the points for sidewalk defects and then rated the defect, where you can see the display by color there. And they took photographs of that. And then they also had a need to share that data with contractors so that they could go in the field and repair the data. So the GIS data was needed to be seen without a map for the contractors. The contractors liked the idea, of course, of the map to get them to the right location, but they also wanted to be able to edit the data on an easy-to-use web page. So Esri's API allows us to view and edit data from the REST endpoint. So you can do a simple search, simple response on a web page. You can add widgets to your website. You can add a web page to your website, and you can also aggregate information from multiple sources, not just GIS, into one web page to display that data on a website or for internal staff. So here's an example of one of the pages that we created for CSD. They're shown a search screen. This particular one is for both staff and contractors. So they have a field that says who's assigned this repair, and if it's an in-house repair, then it only shows up on internal user logins, and if it's a contractor repair, right now they have one contractor, it would show up on the contractor's. The contractor has his own login, and it would show up on his list. They do have the ability to have multiple contractors and have each contractor's login be narrowed down to just the items that have been assigned to them. So they run a search here, they get the results back, and then the contractor edits any repair comments, how much square footage they repaired, the repair date, and if it's completed, yes or no, and then they update that. That data is a live edit to the REST endpoint, so it's immediately available on the map. So the managers have a map that shows the status of each sidewalk repair and whether it's repaired or not right now, if it still needs to be repaired or if it's been repaired. And it will change that sidewalk to green once it's been repaired, and they can visually see a live connection to seeing how the repairs are being done and completed. And this also helped them to, with the square, being able to list the square footage that they estimated and then the actual repair with paying their contractors. So they could export this data out and see how much work had been done to make payments to their contractors. For the drainage, there's a web map that the field staff use to add new inlets that are within or near their park, and then they can also add pipelines and outfalls, or just to trace when the State Water Control Board comes on site for their review. They can show them the inlet that's near their park and then which outfall it falls into. For that review, it'll also help them for any issues that come up with a specific outfall that is backed up. They can figure out which inlets are feeding into that. If there's any kind of problems that are coming through with a specific outfall, they can look at all the inlets that are routed to that outfall and determine what issues are occurring and how to resolve it. They also have a web page for this implementation. The drainage web page is both for internal staff and they're planning to use it on their review with the Water Control Board. And for this web page, they are displaying photos of the outfalls as well as their exact location by latitude and longitude, inspection date, the size, which watershed it goes to, and then they have the ability to edit the fields they wanted to edit were the watershed and comments, so they can add information, edit it here to the live REST endpoint, so these edits are immediately available to field staff on their tablets or to other users using the map in ArcGIS Online. So that's our webinar.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you, Mohammed, as well. We really appreciate everyone's time. And just similar to our last webinar, we will also have the recording of this webinar posted on our blog. So feel free to go check that out if you wanted to recap anything. And finally, don't hesitate to send us any questions about any of the projects that you saw today. You can see our emails there, and we would be glad to answer any of those questions. So again, thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing